So I would like to request Jain sir to give a brief introduction about this so that we can begin with the next part.
Uh, Thank you very much, Varsha. I beg pardon for to all the audience uh, for a bit of delay. We are behind schedule by around half an hour. I also my apologies to Haben for having kept her waiting for this event. But let me tell you, when I was reading today the Q&A which Rahul had with Haben in the event at Oxford, I thought that it was a shame that I was not knowing such a personality, and I was myself motivated. I got motivated on World Disabled Day. I came to know about my sister Haben, whom I unflatteringly call the Helen Keller of the third millennium. So, friends, those who are with us, you are going to have a treat because you are going to meet with a personality who has done wonders, and words are short to explain her achievements. And then I asked my wife very unwittingly, why Nobel Committee does not think novelly? If you can give a Nobel award to a girl from Pakistan for bringing peace, which is commendable, what about thinking of persons with disabilities like Haben who are creating new ideas? I think just as generation of missiles is important, creation of new ideas is equally important. Without creation, without conceiving, you cannot generate. So, friends, we have a personality who visited President Barack Obama during the 25th anniversary of ADA, who has written her autobiography at such a young age. I still wonder what I should write in my autobiography at the age of 50. Uh, Very enviable. And we have a personality, friends, a first deaf-blind woman probably around the world, who must have become graduate from as a wonderful and esteemed university as University of Harvard. And I think the saga of Haben's success does not stop at Harvard. Now she is engaged as an activist, as a lawyer to help people with disability win their cases, help people with disability vindicate their rights. So Haben, I salute you, and I think it is more than coincidence, and it is a big fortune of Law College that we are having you on a momentous day like persons World Disabled Day. Really, you are a motivator, you are an inspirer for all of us, persons with disability included. So thank you very much. And I would request Rahul to start the discussion, and then we have questions too, which we will. And if anyone from audience wants to have one or two questions, because we have very little time, I think around 15 to 20 minutes, or at the most half an hour. That too, depending upon the schedule of Haben. So, thank you, Rahul. Can you please take forward?
Sure. Thanks very much, Professor Jain. Hi, Haben. It's very good to meet with you again. Let me briefly introduce Haben for those who haven't yet read about her or are familiar with her career trajectory. So, as Professor Jain mentioned, Haben became the first deaf-blind person to graduate from Harvard Law School. Before that, she did her undergraduate education at Lewis and Clark College. She's then worked as a disability rights activist and advocate. She was also a Skadden Fellow, which is a very prestigious disability rights fellowship in the US. And since then, she also then went on to release her memoirs, which has gained a lot of acclaim. And I've read it myself. It's called Haben, the Deaf-Blind Woman Who Conquered Harvard Law, and it's a very moving account, a very clear-eyed account of all the challenges that she's had to confront and the kind of skills that she's had to exhibit and sort of her vision for how the world can better accommodate people with disabilities. So thanks very much, Haben, for joining us here today. Are you able to follow? Are you able to hear this? As in, kind of get this?
Hello, everyone. This is Haben speaking. I'm speaking with my own voice, and I'm going to start out with a visual description because I want to make sure this is fully accessible to blind and sighted attendees. I am sitting in my living room. There's a black sofa behind me. I'm wearing a black top and a mic on my dress. And people often ask me, how are you speaking if you are deaf-blind? Deaf-blindness is a spectrum, different levels of vision and hearing loss. Some people communicate by voice, some by sign language, some by using computers and typing. There are certain communities that dismiss my voice because it's a feminine, high-frequency voice. And that's not right. We need to create communities where all voices are valued, regardless of whether it's a feminine or masculine voice, whether it's an accent or whether they have used sign language instead of speech. And it's up to us to help do the work of removing barriers. So I'm speaking with my voice to find out what Rahul is saying. I'm using a Braille computer and I'm holding it up. So there's Braille dots along the bottom and I run my fingers over the dots. They pop up as my assistant types. So he types when he hears Rahul, I read it in Braille and then respond by voice. There's a bit of a delay between when Rahul speaks and when I respond, and that's because the transcription is still coming through. But I will get to your questions, Rahul. I'm excited to be in conversation again.
Thanks very much, Haben. I'm sorry I had to slightly make a few logistical changes, which is why the slight lag. Thanks very
Can I
much
ask
for
the
the.
first question? Can I ask the first question?
Sure. Professor Jain would like to ask you a question, so I'll go later then.
Hasan, can you briefly describe your encounters and interactions in Harvard? How did you get there, and what were your experiences? And was there any negative experience also at Harvard?
Great question. So a lot of people are surprised how a deaf-blind person would go to a difficult university like Harvard Law School. I did not jump into Harvard out of nowhere. First, I started in elementary school where I learned Braille, cane travel, and important blindness skills. You need to first develop those tools. And I was also learning reading, writing, mathematics. I had an excellent education, which formed the foundation that allowed me to later get to Harvard. So that continued through college, where I also had my blindness skills. My partnership with a seeing eye dog also helped. That's how I navigated the school campus with partnership of my guide dog. The way guide dogs work, they don't exactly know where you want to go. You have to tell them forward, left, right. The blind person is always in charge. The blind person is leading the team. So I had all of these skills already before I came to Harvard. Then I went to Harvard, and surprisingly, they understood the law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and they ensured that barriers were removed so I could fully participate in my classes, exams, internships, all aspects of the school program. The ballroom dance team. One must get exercise when they're in law school. So I had access to all different programs at the university.
Professor Jain, would you like to ask the next
Yeah,
question or
yeah,
yes?
yeah. What did you have any negative experience in Harvard? And what about socialization with friends? What about Flicking out with friends. Were your Harvard friends good to you?
It takes time to develop friendships. I value people who are committed to public service. So I joined clubs around public service, so social justice groups, and I met other people who shared my values, and that facilitated friendships. I also participated in groups like the Women's Law Group or the Black Law Students Association, and that helped create programming to allow me to build relationships. As a deaf person, I needed access to interpreters so I could have communication access. And there's some schools that actually tell deaf people, sorry, we're not going to provide you an interpreter, only in classes. And in some schools, not even in classes. But under the law in the US, deaf people need to have full access to programs at the university, including extracurricular programs. So I was able to have access to the social programs as well.
Last question from my side. Although I would have loved to ask you so many other questions, but I was very excited to learn that you went to Male to build a school, helping an organization to build a school, and you were able to convince your parents to go that far. So, how were your experiences in Male when you were building the school?
So my parents did not want me to go to Mali and build a school because they were concerned for my safety. They said, there's snakes, there's malaria, you'll be kidnapped, it's not safe. But really what they were scared of was how would their blind and deaf daughter survive without them? They were scared to let me go, just like lots of parents are scared to let their disabled child explore the world. So I told them, you know what? I don't know exactly how to build a school, and the American sighted students also don't know how to build a school. We'll learn together. We'll figure it out. And they eventually allowed me to go and travel to Mali with a volunteer program to build a school. The program manager showed me exactly where the device was to build the bricks, where the sieve was, so I could lift the shovel and dump the sand through the sieve to help make bricks. Or we dug up a pit to build a latrine so the students would have a bathroom. I participated in all of those programs because it was physical, and I could do that. I could physically do that. As soon as someone showed me what to do, then I could take it from there. After that experience, when I came back home to my parents in California, they had a little more confidence in my ability, but just a little. They're still my parents. They're always going to be nervous.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. That's extremely motivating and inspiring.
Haben speaking, I want to add that in the disability community, there's some stigma around the word inspiring and inspiration. There's a fear that sometimes people say inspiring when they're not really sure what to say. A lot of disabled kids grow up being told they're inspiring for tying their shoe, for brushing their teeth, for choosing to stay alive. And I'd love to have higher expectations for disabled kids and especially disabled adults. So when people say you're inspiring, my question is, what are you inspired to do? How about you, Rahul? What are you inspired to do?
No, I really, I mean, I paused after Professor Jain's comment because I knew you were going to respond to the inspiring term. Therefore, because engaged with you about this issue, I was fairly confident you were going to say something along
No,
those
I
lines.
went with full humility.
Yes. No, but I quite agree with you that there is
You
a
know me
difference.
well.
Indeed. Yeah, so I quite agree with you that there's a difference between using inspiring as a blanket term versus considering a particular action inspiring or something that inspires you to be an ally to a disabled person. I noticed that Judge Gould is also with us, so I just want to give him the opportunity if he so chooses to interact with Haben and ask him a question, only if he would like to.
Yes. Yes,
Yes,
thanks.
Judge
Well,
Gould. Yes.
Uh, I'm delighted to have the chance to offer a question up for Haben, who's uh, achieved much already with more to come. My question is, Haben, if there were one or two books or essays or works that you would encourage us to read that relate to the challenges that other abled, if I've got that term right, that I heard my colleagues saying tonight, that people should focus on. What would those books or essays be?
So you are asking me, and I am 100% biased because I wrote a book specifically hoping to teach non-disabled people about ableism. Ableism is the root of many of the problems facing disabled people. Ableism is the assumption that disabled people are incompetent and inferior to non-disabled people. Ableism comes up in schools, in government, education, employment, in friendships and families. So I want people to learn to identify ableism when it comes up in all these different settings. And in my book, I share through stories examples of how ableism pops up in family settings, or how it appears in school, or how ableism intersects with sexism and racism and other forms of oppression. So I strongly encourage people to read the book. But Rahul did say that he enjoyed it. So it's not just me who's saying this.
Yes, yes, I did, and it was in high demand last year when we did the Oxford Equality Lecture. A lot of people purchased it after the event. I must also mention that when I shared Habib's conversation with me with Judge Gould last year, the judge was so impressed by Habib that he in fact offered her a clerkship in his chambers.
Oh,
So it's quite an opportune moment for the two to interact with each other, and I'm very glad that we've been able to facilitate that. Uh,
Right, can I add a comment? I just want to say that Haben will have a hearty welcome in Seattle if he ever wants to return to the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you. That was an incredible honor. I was so touched to get that email, and I'm glad Rahul connected us. I'm also a huge fan of Seattle. There's amazing coffee in Seattle.
And yes, and some nice mountains that you could climb.
So, Habin, one question that I have for you is one theme that has come up in our conversations in the last couple of days has been this notion of how in the legal profession some people feel, some lawyers with disabilities, for example, one of our speakers yesterday said that he realized that people, when given the choice, would choose an able-bodied lawyer over him because no one would prefer a disabled person when given the choice. They would be better off having an able-bodied person because it would be less difficult and less complicated. So how would you respond to that kind of inhibition that someone might have? And also, how, according to you, can that structural reality be changed? So it's a question both for what the disabled person should do in this situation and what we can do to change that situation also.
I would respond by giving stories and examples of disabled lawyers being chosen and cherished and treasured by their clients. Everyone I work with chooses me and comes out of their way to work with me. That's an example. And if more disabled and non-disabled lawyers knew this, that would shift the stigma, that would shift how disabled lawyers are perceived, and more clients would gravitate towards talented lawyers, disabled or non-disabled.
Right. So you're essentially saying that it's a question of being able to put yourself out there and prove your capacity. And once you do that, people will begin to be drawn to you and change will take place. Is that right?
To an extent, it's a matchmaking process. So you need to build up your talent as a disabled attorney, but you also have to find the community that will value you. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I work heavily with tech and accessibility, and there are so many people here who are interested in this and value this. If I was living in rural Alaska, I may not have as many clients. So part of it is having a match between your talents and the community.
Yeah. Right. Thanks for that. And then my last question to you is this. What would because this summit is specifically on legal professionals with disabilities, so what would your take-home message be for people who might be watching this, in terms of employers who might tomorrow have an employee, an associate in their law firm with a disability, or an intern, or a judge who might watch this and tomorrow might consider having a law clerk with a disability? What would your take-home message for them be?
So a lot of people, their first thought regarding disability is, oh, that must be so difficult. There must be so much extra work. And that completely blocks the talent initially. If you could switch your mindset to actually notice the talent, you will benefit in the long run because you can open your firm or your law classes to more talented people. And back to your earlier questions about fearing clients would only prefer non-disabled attorneys, I have chosen to work in disability rights and advocacy. And there have been so many situations where a client felt only I could understand them because of my own experiences working in this field and the experiences I've developed in disability advocacy and disability law. So similarly, when disabled attorneys are working and when they're working in other fields outside of disability law, they'll find people who value them for the specific talents they bring. So clients will recognize your talents. It takes time to get to that point, But if you're patient and persist, and the employers do the work of removing barriers, then you'll find an amazing community of clients who value you and colleagues of fellow attorneys who also value you.
Right. Thanks very much. That's really all I had for now. Thanks very much for all your answers. Is there anything more that you would like to say or that you might like to ask us? How would you like to? What are your concluding reflections, if any?
Rahul, before you ask her to do that, can you ask if there are one or two
Yes,
questions from
please.
others?
Yes, please. Are there any audience Q&A questions?
Presently, there are no questions from the audience.
Right. Right.
I see.
Ask her to come.
Yeah, so there are no audience questions, Haben, at this stage. So would you mind sharing with us your concluding reflections today?
Absolutely. Here are my concluding remarks. If you feel inspired by this presentation, by the ideas I've shared, pick one barrier in your community and help do the work of removing that barrier. Sometimes as disabled attorneys, we tell ourselves, oh, it's just a small thing, I'll just tolerate this, it's just me. But if you let that barrier stay there, all the people who try to come after you, other disabled attorneys, or disabled clients coming to your office will struggle with that barrier. When you take the time to address a barrier, even a small barrier, you help all the people who come after you, and you make the community more inclusive. So I hope we could all choose at least one barrier to help remove, to make the community more inclusive.
Right. Thank you so much, Haben. It's been a joy to interact with you as ever, and we're very grateful to you for sharing those remarks.
On behalf of ILS of College, I'm right now holding the charge of the principal here. I'm also applying. And really, I enjoyed interaction with you, and I look forward to have more interaction with you. Really, thank you very much for taking out the time from your busy schedule and giving us wonderful thoughts.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
You're
Haben.
very
Thank you,
welcome,
Rahul.
Professor Jain.
Yeah.
Before
Thanks,
we close,
everyone.
yes, so before we close down this session, I would like to thank all the speakers for taking out time from their busy schedule for this summit and showing their commitment towards the cause of differently abled people. Justice A.K. Sikri, Justice Richard Bernstein, Justice Ronald Gord, Judge Jaggi, Justice Zach Yakub. Thank you all. I would also like to thank Justice Madan Lokur for wonderfully steering the entire discussion. My word of thanks also goes to Haben Girma for sharing her experiences with us and Rahul for coordinating the fireside chat. I also have to thank the management of Indian Law Society, Ms. Vaijayanti Joshi, Director, Academics and Administration, ILS Law College, Principal Dr. Sanjay Jain, the entire team of ILS, our collaborators for this entire 3-day event, that is Harvard Law School Project on Disability, Oxford Human Rights Hub, Center for Disability Studies, University of Leeds, London, publicity partners Bar and Bench, and media partners Udan. I thank all the participants for your active participation. Today we will be meeting again in the evening at 6 p.m. according to the Indian Standard Time for the keynote speech and the valedictory speech. See you all in the evening. Thank you one and all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a
you,
lot.
Judge Gould, for staying all the way through. I'm sure it must be quite late where you are.
Yes.
So we really appreciate that.
But I
Yes.
appreciate
Yeah.
Thank you, Judge Gul. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
All right.